Years ago, when I was lecturing to my freshman class on the origin of species by natural selection, occurring as a result of local changes in the environment, a student asked me the following question. She asked if she assumed that the local environment at every location on Earth throughout Earth's history remained constant. Would that simply mean that one of the main mechanisms you proposed for natural selection of species would not hold? And the answer to her question is a resounding yes. Now, I want to go back a little bit to the beagle. And of course, Darwin was in three very different environments. He went to the forest, to the rainforest. He went to the beaches. He went to the deserts, cooped up on his little boat, and he arrives at the Galapagos Islands. You know, the ocean on the left, the islands on the right, and an incredible amount of organisms. He's just blown away. If we look at the three conditions of natural selection, let's look at the ocean environment. And in Darwin's famous book on the origin of species, he discusses salmon. Now, this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but he says if every salmon in the ocean produced eggs, and every egg produced another adult salmon that also produced eggs, and this occurred for many generations, soon everybody on Earth would be up to their knees in salmon. Now, this, of course, is absurd. There's be other things going on. But it's a wonderful example that nature overproduces. And it's this overproduction of a species in a local environment which is one of the key principles in the origin of species by natural selection. The second one we talked about was variation. Each individual in the species has a different property. Now, for instance, again, my friend Stephen Jay Gould would talk about the woolly elephant. If you go up to the north, you go to Siberia, and here you have the mammoth elephant. If you go to India, Africa, you have a different type of elephant. And is the mammoth elephant a better elephant than the Asian or African elephant? Of course not. But it is a better elephant in that environment. Long hair, all the conditions to withstand the terrible cold. If you put the mammoth elephant into Africa or India, it would die. Certainly it's not adapted to that climate. Or you take the Asian elephant and put it up in Siberia, it would die. So you cannot say what is better or for worse. You could say only it is better in this one environment. And then the last point, of course, was that these variations, many are detrimental. That's okay, the organism just won't survive. But the ones that are neutral will probably just passed on to offspring with no effect at all. The detrimental ones would probably cause an early death, maybe even before reproduction of the organism. But that's definite population, small as it might be, of beneficial variations, beneficial in that particularly local environment. Let's say the temperature dropped down 20 degrees below the previous year. Those individuals who have a slight advantage would pass that advantage off to their offspring. And for maybe a couple generations, you would have organisms that would survive better in the cold than their great-great-great-grandfathers did. And if suddenly we had a warming I'm not speaking of global warming, but a local warming in the place where those organisms reside, a local environment, then you'd have an opposite selection. Those organisms who have by accident, by variation, have a higher probability of surviving in the heat would produce more offsprings, and many of those would have that same variation. And so you have the origin of species by natural selection. This is the mechanism that Darwin had proposed. So I think that probably hits the nail right on the head of why this was the biggest and the best idea that anybody has ever had. So that's the end of my story, and I thank you for listening.